Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the last session in the Dartmouth Questbridge Summer Series from this summer. This is called Get a Head Start Essay Writing Workshop. My name is Kate Featherston. I am a Senior Assistant Director of Admissions here at Dartmouth. I'm really excited to welcome you to this session. Hopefully you'll get a lot of great information from the session tonight. We love putting on these panels and workshops for you all and really think that this is a great opportunity for you not only to learn about Dartmouth, but also about the holistic college admissions process more generally. I know I'm the first in my family to go to college, so these sessions are near and dear to my heart, and Jenny's as well. So I'll have her introduce herself in a moment. But these are really a way for us to ensure that you get to see behind the veil of college admissions and sort of understand what we're thinking as admissions officers and get an idea of what goes into a good college application, good essays, and how to strengthen your own application. So we also have 4 other sessions in the series. You can definitely head to our website. We'll put the link in the chat pretty soon to be able to go over there and view those recordings. We are also going to have a recording of tonight's session, so if you can't take notes or you need to dip out a little bit early, no worries. We'll definitely have that available for you. And with that, I'd love to have my colleague Jenny introduce herself and get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenny. I get to work with Kate in the admissions office at Dartmouth. I'm excited to be with you all this evening to talk about college admissions. Back in the day when I was applying to college, I was a Questbridge College Prep Scholar. And so there are lots of great programs out there like Questbridge. And so we're excited to get to chat with you all about what makes a good college essay, because things like this were really formative for Kate and myself when we were going through the college application process. And so we hope to be able to impart that wisdom. But we want to hear from you first, and let us know in the chat, and that'll only come to us. Nobody else will see it. But what makes a good college essay in your minds when you're thinking about that? So if you want to write us in the chat, that would be fantastic. And we'll just read a few of those options. It could be anything. Genuineness. We're seeing that. Yeah, something that's reflective.
Memorable, I like that one.
Yeah, something that reveals about the writer, right? And you're gonna, you do a lot in the college application, right? It's a lot of pages. I think when all is said and done, on the Common App at least, and on the Questbridge app too, it's about 40 pages of information. So we get a lot about you. A lot of it is from other people too. But saying something that's new that maybe you hadn't focused on in another part of your application, that could be really helpful in the essay. Personable.
Engaging, authentic.
Yeah, it displays who you really are, reveals your way of thinking, maybe your personality.
Yeah, but I like this, telling your story outside of the educational aspect. Yeah, we get a lot of information from you about your grades and your test scores and all of that, but your essay is really an opportunity for us to get to know you outside of academics.
Yeah. Somebody wrote here also, it helps reveal what you offer to the college or university in question. That is something, right? Some colleges might explicitly ask you, what might you bring to a residential hall, or how might you be impactful in the classroom on our campus or in this academic program that we offer. And so sometimes they'll explicitly ask you, and sometimes they'll maybe subtly ask you about those things. And so we're going to talk about all of that. Yeah. These are fantastic.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we're going to start off today's session with a quick exercise. This is one of my favorites when you're thinking about writing. I think the biggest question a lot of students have when they get to starting to think about writing their essays, or really thinking through the college application, they're like, what do I write about? What is a good topic? And that question I get asked a lot. I'm sure Jenny gets asked a lot as an admissions officer, like, what is a good topic? What is a bad topic? And this exercise hopefully will give you an idea of what is not just a good topic generally, but what's a good topic for you, and what sort of topics bring out your passions, your personality, and really showcase you in the best light. So if you want to go to the next page, Jenny. So you'll see on the screen right now a list of 13 topics plus 14, which is you choose. So really an unlimited number of topics here. that are pretty typical college essay topics. What we're going to do today is work through and think about what you care about to start developing this idea of a narrative. What is the narrative that you want to tell within your college essays? And what sort of story do you want to tell about you as a person, as a student, and as an applicant to an institution? So we've got these 13 here. So I'm going to have you start by going through this list and think about the different aspects of these topics that really connect to your own identity, things that you consider important to yourself. I'll use myself as an example. When I was growing up, I think when I was 17 and sort of doing this college application process, I think a big part of what I was thinking about is socioeconomics, like paying for college, sort of the differences between socioeconomics of people at my high school versus institutions that I was looking at. Family was a really big thing. And I think my part-time job was something that I spent a lot of time on. So those are sort of things that I was thinking about. But I hope that you can take a moment and pick out maybe 5 of these topics, and you can jot them down on a piece of paper next to you on your phone, or just kind of keep them in your mind. If you had to narrow down all of these potential topics you could talk about, what are the 5 that you would choose? And I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that before we move on. And then once you have those 5 in mind, I'm going to have you narrow that down to 3. So maybe you put the first 5 here on the list. Can you narrow that down to 3 topics? For some of you, that may be really easy. Maybe there are only a couple topics that are really, really important to describing who you are, or are things that you're really passionate about. For others, maybe you have a lot of passions, a lot of different topics that you're interested in. So as you sit with those 3, now I'm going to ask you to narrow it down to just 2 topics. And I think that's when it gets kind of hard, when you have to narrow it down even further. And I'm curious in the chat if you want to share with us how it feels kind of narrowing down topics. Is it easy? Is it difficult? A couple people saying it's challenging, for sure. Whenever I do this exercise with folks, a lot of people kind of point to this idea of intersectionality, or they come to this idea of intersectionality where you can't talk about my family without talking about religion, for example, or you can't talk about academics without bringing in community service. There are lots of these topics that intersect one another. And I think that is really impactful of an idea when you start to think about your essay. If you want to have an essay on religion, that does not mean that you can't talk about family, or that doesn't mean that you can't talk about race or ethnicity. There are lots of different ways that you can kind of incorporate multiple topics. Someone says, it feels like I have to choose which part of me will be best accepted by colleges. I think that's a really a profound thought that I think a lot of folks have. They are thinking about not only what is important to me, but also what is important to the colleges that I'm interested in. And I think we'll talk about this later on in the workshop as well. But for us as admissions officers, we never want you to feel like you need to write to us or write to this process. We want this to be an opportunity not only for us to learn about you, but for you also to learn about yourself in the process. I think this is a really impactful time in your life where you're going to be able to make decisions for yourself about where you're going to end up at school, kind of how you want to present yourself in this process. And that's really exciting, and you have a lot of agency there. And I think the other thing to note about this exercise is that this is not how it works in real life, right? You never have to narrow down your identity to 1 or 2 different topics. There are so many different essays that you're going to be able to write for the college application process, especially for the QuestBridge application. There are so many different small essays or big essays that you can use to talk about those different aspects of your personality. So narrowing it down to 5, probably pretty easy for most of you. Narrowing it down further, pretty hard. So the fact that you have supplement essays, you have additional QuestBridge essays in addition to your kind of larger personal statement, means that you're going to have lots of opportunities to talk about these different topics, and you won't have to leave anything out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kate. That was wonderful. And exactly that's the point, right? So we really want to emphasize today and in this workshop, thinking about those supplemental essays or those other writing sections of your application that you're going to be able to do. And hopefully, how do you maximize that space that you're using? And how do you make sure you're getting at what the college is asking for and you're thinking about that? So supplemental essays, as you probably know, are additional pieces of writing that many highly selective colleges and universities and scholarship programs will use to try to gauge a little bit more of who you are as a person. Because like I said, right, the college application is about 40 pages, but you are 17-ish years of life. And we don't get to see all of that, right? Because most of the time when we're looking at your applications, you're almost like a PDF on our screens as admissions officers. So those essays are really those great ways for you to flesh out who you are as a person and how you want to convey yourself to the colleges. So we're going to talk a little bit about those supplemental essays, like I mentioned. So what should you expect? What might they look like? What are they going to be asking? A pretty common one is going to be why this school, why this program? The college will ask you to tell them what has attracted you to that. How do you fit with them? How do they fit with you? And what you might want to do while you're at that school or doing that academic program that's offered there. It might be one or several short response essays. For the QuestBridge application, which you all saw and were familiar with because you at least applied to the college prep scholarship, you saw that there were multiple little kind of short answer sections. That might be very similar. Some colleges might just ask one additional essay and they'll give you a word limit of what that might look like. And there might be some additional school specific questions that some schools might say, what kind of roommate might you be? Because maybe being a roommate and on that residential campus, maybe you're going to have to do that for 4 years of their college experience. They want to make sure you're going to be a good roommate. It might say, why do you want to be at this engineering program that we have offered at our school, right? They're going to ask those very kind of detailed academic program or kind of social life program specific questions. And what are they used for? Why are colleges making you write more? It really, and a large part of this, I think, to keep in mind as students is that in college admissions, especially if you're using the common application, we as admissions officers don't have a total ton of control of what the common application asks you. What we do have control over are what our supplemental essays ask you, because we get to design those, at least in the Dartmouth office and in many other offices, by ourselves in the admissions office, right? So we're the ones who are making those questions, trying to get at those specific kind of details of what makes you you, what might you bring to our campus, right? And so they communicate our values, what do we see as important as an institution, and what are we trying to gauge when we're building a community. It's more space for you to shine through, right? Because again, the college application pretty much a PDF. And so we want to get to know you as much as possible, even though we know we're asking you to do a little bit more work and that you're stressed out already, but we think that it's good work because we're getting to know you and get to meet you in a different way. And an opportunity to get school specific, right? That common application essay is very, very broad. And same with the QuestBridge essay, the long one. It's going to be a very broad question that they ask you to detail specific instances in your life, who you are, but then these supplemental essays will get that a little bit more specific throughout. And so you can really tailor your responses to what those are asking. So we have some examples for you that we're going to show you here. And Kate, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I'll take the first couple of examples here. So these are examples of the Dartmouth supplements that we asked just to get an idea of what a college might ask you. These are just a couple of the many that we offer you to choose from. And we'll also talk a little bit more about this, like why Dartmouth or why this school essay later on. But for these examples, we wanted to show you these as really to get you thinking about what is this college actually asking and what does that tell me about the school? So looking at an application can also be a way that you can research the institution, just like Jenny was saying before. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jenny, we've highlighted some key phrases here that can give you an idea of what the specific question is asking. So for the first one, there is a Toni Morrison quote. And really, it's all about celebrating your curiosity. So that is what the question is really kind of getting at. And the reason why we chose this is because folks that are adventurous in the classroom and really like to find solutions and come up with new ideas, those are the types of students that will really thrive at an institution like Dartmouth. So we have that as one of our supplement questions because we want you to recognize that as one of our core values, but also so that we attract students who also have that as one of their core values. The second here is another quote. We love to use quotes in our supplements from a former Dartmouth president, President Dickey, that says, "The world's troubles are your troubles, and there's nothing wrong with the world that better human beings cannot fix." And this is sort of a multi-part question, and something that I've noticed a lot, Jenny and I were talking about this as we were putting the slideshow together, is that sometimes folks don't answer the entire question. They'll answer one bit or another bit, but maybe not the whole thing. So this part here where we highlighted inspires you to act, and then how might your course of study at Dartmouth prepare you to address it? So there we're asking you, what is inspirational to you? Kind of what gets you out of bed in the morning? That's that first question. And then the second one is about how does your course of study, so your academics, what you're doing while you're a student here at Dartmouth, how does that help solve or contribute to a solution to that problem? So this tells you that Dartmouth is interested in folks who want to be change makers, that are really interested in finding solutions to the problems that they see in the world and see themselves as being able to contribute to those solutions. So here, just in 2 supplement questions, you learn a little bit about not only the type of student that Dartmouth is looking for, but also how we kind of view ourselves. And that is something that can really help you in the research process, but also helps you when you're answering these questions, really making sure that you're speaking to those values that the question is trying to get you at. So this is about sort of fitting in those passions that we talked about in the previous exercise, and sort of figuring out how do those passions, that those things that are really important to me, how do they fit into the values that this institution is talking about? So for example, maybe community service is really big for you. B could be a really great question for you to answer at Dartmouth. Maybe that, why do you do community service? It's probably not for the hours. It's probably because you really get something out of it. You feel like you're contributing to your community or the greater good. That's a great opportunity to talk about that if that is a value that is really important to you. I think, Jenny, you have a couple more examples.
I do, yes. And so you all may be familiar, you all are familiar with QuestBridge, and you might be thinking if you're about the QuestBridge application. So we've pulled some of the supplements. That application just went live very recently. So here are some of the examples of additional questions that QuestBridge might ask you that we as admissions officers at our institutions, if you were to rank us, we would see the answers to these questions too, in addition to QuestBridge seeing the answers to these questions. So here are the 3 of them. You only choose one, right? And so at Dartmouth and at many schools, they might give you a few options, and truly the options are for you to decide which one do you want to write about that speaks to you the most, and choosing that. So don't feel like you have to answer all of them, even though, because we're asking for so many different things, we really just want you to choose one if we're saying that. So again, here we've highlighted what are those most important key phrases that we encourage you to do this also when you're answering these questions, right? To make sure that you're going to be answering the prompts that the school is asking or that the program is asking about. So the first one, right? What sparked your intellectual curiosity? Something that you have tried to explore. Why did you find it intriguing, right? They want to know what makes you tick, academically speaking, intellectually speaking. Maybe the second one really speaks to you, right? What is something that challenged your perspective and made you want to change your opinion, right? Describing an instance of that. I think another thing we could have highlighted in this one is describe an experience, right? They're asking for a singular or more singular kind of a thing. They're not asking for a whole big narrative detail of 17 different years. They want kind of a more singular instance and how you came to that. And then the third option is, what do you admire about your community? Thinking about where you come from. That could be your home community, your religious community, your school community, and what pieces of that do you really love? What pieces of that do you love so much that you think they can improve also, right? So they're asking you, what would you improve? What would you change if you could? Because you love something so much, that kind of critical love perspective. So these are some examples of some of the questions that QuestBridge asks you. And if these kinds of questions really speak to you, the QuestBridge application might be a really great one for you to fill out, because maybe that's in line with your own values also as a student. We also want to talk about a little more specific and nitty gritty about why a certain school's essay. So we're going to go to that next.
Great. So the why this school essay. So it comes in many different forms. Schools ask it in many different ways. We use a quote because we love using quotes in our essay questions. But other schools may just flat out say, why do you want to come to this school? They may ask it in a lot of different ways, but really it boils down to what about this particular school stood out to you of the thousands and thousands of institutions that you could have attended across the country, across the world. It's a really common question. So it's one that you should be prepared to answer for all of the schools that you're applying to, all of the schools that you might want to put on your match list. It's also a really great way for you to really think through the pros and cons of every institution that you're applying to. It's not just for us to read, it's also for you as you're writing it to cement your feelings about the school, what you like about it, what you don't, and really helps you with your research as well. So do your research, get really specific. We're going to give you a couple examples next of different why certain school essays, just to get an idea of what makes a good one, what makes a not so good one, and how can you make yours as specific and as to the point as possible. So I think, Jenny, you're going to go with the first example and I'll go with the second one.
Perfect. Yeah. So speaking to what Kate was just mentioning about how do we phrase it? Here's actually how Dartmouth asks its why this school essay. And so why we say why Dartmouth, we phrase it as this famous Dartmouth alum from back in the day who argued in front of the Supreme Court. And he said, it is indeed a small college, and yet there are those who love it. So we'll say what parts of Dartmouth's program, the experiences here that you've heard about, that you've read about, what attracts you to the college, academically, socially, whatever that could look like for you. So we have an example right now of a why this school essay. So we'll show this to you. And so I'm going to give you about 30 seconds or so to read this. I know that's quick, but wanting you to digest this and just think about this. We've redacted the school name here. And while you read this, I'm also going to launch a quick poll, and I want you to think about which school is this? So we're seeing some of the answers here. You all are much quicker readers than I am. But yes, we're kind of all over. I'll keep the poll open right now because some folks have not been able to do it just yet, and that's okay. But I think the results are showing kind of what we wanted it to show, or what we think that this exemplifies, right? Is that this essay here, it's not super specific. It could really be any college, any liberal arts college, any college that has a English program that's set in the New England area of the United States. That's like the one indicator that we're seeing here. There are some folks who have said Dartmouth, and that's a good guess because we're Dartmouth admissions officers. Great job there. But most folks, I think, were right in thinking that that this could really be any of the schools that are on this list here, right? I want to attend this school because it's a great place to study this academic area with professors who are going to challenge you. At every school, professors are going to challenge you. That's why they're professors. The town is beautiful. Yes, small towns in New England generally are really pretty, especially in the fall, and especially when you get to see the rest of those seasons too, right? And so making sure that your essay is hopefully not this. If this was your essay, if maybe you have a working essay that looks like this right now, that's okay. That's why we're in this kind of a session, right? Is because we think that it can improve a little bit, right? Because this one is good, but it can be great for certain colleges. And so making sure that you're really being very specific about what these are going to look, what these could look like for your why this school or why this program essay is going to be really important. So now we're going to go to another one. And this one, we're going to admit this up front. This is definitely a Dartmouth example. So I'll give you again a 30 seconds or so to read this one. We have a great question in the chat right now, actually asking about what would be the best way to tackle the why essay, and to focus on your personal favorite parts of the school. And that's exactly it, right? What are your personal favorite parts of the school? Things that you've learned online. If maybe you've gotten to visit a school that's in your city or in your town or nearby, what made you like that campus or what made you like that environment when you got to do that visit. Having it be a personal tie to you is really something that's important. And being specific about the school. We like to hear about our schools, right? We like you to like the school that you're applying to. And we like these schools because we work for them. And so we want to hear those reasons that you're attracted to it, that fit you best, and that's going to get you to where you want to go later on, right? What kind of things does our campus offer that will help you on your path? So folks in the chat, if you want to write really quickly, which applicant would you admit, applicant A or applicant B? Let's say you are Dartmouth admissions officers. What would folks say? It's resounding, Kate. I don't know if you're seeing these votes come in, but it is B, yes, because applicant B really did their homework about Dartmouth, right? And maybe sometimes you might say, I don't know a lot about these schools. I'm just applying to them, right? But that's your job as an applicant, is to do as much research as you can, Googling, talking to students, attending sessions like this, which is fantastic. You already have a great kind of leg up on the application process, but learning as much as you can about these schools, even in a virtual setting. And to make sure that these why this school, why this program essay are specific and tailored to you as possible, right? And so let's say your entire application is about English, is about an academic English program. You're not going to probably be writing like this student who's talking about going to Beijing on a language study abroad. You might, but you might not be, right? It might be way more tailored towards the English department's offerings. And we know that that's the case for you. And so keeping that in mind, that we want it to be specific for you. What parts of our program fit you best? Where can we help you grow as a student so that when you graduate, you've done the things you wanted to do, and that you're thoughtful about that going into it when you're 16, 17, 18. So now, Kate, do you have anything to add here right now? Sorry.
There's a lot of great questions in the chat about this. I think this got folks thinking, which is great. I think there's a couple I kind of want to throw your way, and I'll help answer them too. Can you talk about just one specific thing, or do you feel that that's too narrow in the why Dartmouth or why this school essay? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say it depends on kind of what that one thing is. I would try as much as possible. And what's hard is that, truth be told, on the why Dartmouth essay, we do tell you also to do it in 100 words or less, which is a very, very short paragraph. And so one or two things I would say to focus on, but if it's one thing, trying to get as detailed as possible with it. If it's let's use the English department example. Which professors in the English department, which classes have you seen that are being offered with the English department? Maybe it's because you want to go on the English department study away program, or do a really cool internship opportunity through the English department, or TA or teachers being a teacher assistant for the English department. If that's the one thing, then I think that that's okay. But I wouldn't have the one thing be maybe just like the social aspect of a school or of a campus environment. I would have a couple of things in there to make sure that the school knows that it's not easily replaceable, right? You couldn't have just inserted Bates or Dartmouth or Williams or Connecticut College into that kind of school name. And then also that you've been really thoughtful about the decision, because we want to admit you and we're so excited for you to come to our campus for 4 years, 6 years, however long it might take you to graduate. But we want you to know what the campus is like. And in little ways, we can gauge a little bit of that from these essays. Kate, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I was also thinking about another question here that is sort of the opposite of that. How do we not just list every single thing that we're interested in a college? How does it become an essay and not just a list of things that are really interesting? And I think that that's similar to the way you were answering the last question, is really thinking through what are the really essential things about this college that I can't get anywhere else, that I'm really excited about. Whether that's a specific professor, a specific class, an interesting department, a tradition, all of those things are fair game for these why this school essays. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to our magazine. It's called 3D. Every like once or twice a year, I'm not sure if it's every issue, we post what we call Humans of Hanover, which is an example of different why Dartmouth essays from many different students from other years. You can get an idea of what folks are writing about, what things are they kind of pointing to as really interesting to them. This is not to say go copy one of these essays, they're really great, This is to say, these are examples of how other students have thought through this question to give you an idea of the way you might think through this question too. Other schools may have different resources for that, where you can maybe go to the admissions blog and learn about why a specific student chose that college. That's a really great way to kind of get an idea of starting to think about what makes this school unique and how can I really thrive at a place like this? Because it's really not about you listing things that are of interest to us. It's really about you listing things that are of interest to you and really understanding yourself and understanding the colleges that you're applying to in this process. That's going to make decision time in April or whenever you get your decisions back a lot easier for you, because you've done all of this information this work ahead of time, this information collecting. So you really know the institutions that you're applying to, so that it is easier to make your decision later on down the road.
We are getting a ton of great questions in the chat. I'm seeing, and in the Q&A section, which I'm not sure if other folks can see them, but know that we are keeping our eyes on them and making sure we're going to get to them. One of them that I just want to point back to, because it's asking about the word count, and when do colleges need you to hit that word count? That kind of depends on the school, but the vast majority of places will give about a 500-ish word count to the main essay, right? And 500 is usually kind of the max that they will say. For essays that are longer like that, they're not going to count individual words. I would say don't go over the word count, because a lot of these programs will actually cut you off. And so we might not see the ending or the last paragraph if you have gone over that. But you don't have to go to 500 or to 650 words. It could be 600 words. We're not going to know the difference. I would say when it's those shorter essays, right, they'll say 200 words or less, 300 words or less. That's looking for like a paragraph or maybe 2 paragraphs. And for those, I would say making sure that they're longer than like 2 sentences is really what they're going for, right? Because they're wanting to get specific things out of there, but know that we're not individually counting every single word while you're doing that. So you don't need to be kind of right at that word limit, but getting somewhere close to it to make sure you're doing yourself justice throughout the process. And now we're going through tips and advice. And so then we're going to get to the rest of these Q&A, because there's a lot of great questions that are coming up. I think the first thing and you all pointed to this at the very beginning of the session, is tell your story, right? You know yourself best. I think a lot of students sometimes worry that their perspective, what they're sharing, their lives are not unique, and that they don't have kind of unique things to be telling a college or a university. But that's not the case at all, right? Because of course you are unique. So if you're telling your story yourself in your words, using that language that you use, describing yourself in your interests, you will of course be unique there. And so making sure that you are getting the points across that you want to get across. That list that Kate showed earlier today, or the one with the 13 different items on there, and the optional choose your own if you'd like that, number 14. If you chose something there and you think that it is the most important thing in your life, make sure that one of your essays talks about that, right? Make sure that you are at least touching upon that item, that theme in one of your application essays. Because if you don't, the colleges won't know, right? We're not going to know how important kind of your socioeconomic status is to you unless you share that with us. If it is this kind of integral part of your identity that you think that you would write about above all else or think about above all else. So that's something that we want you to leave away with. Make sure you're excited about it as well, right? If you are not excited or having fun while you're writing your essay, imagine how much non-excitement and non-fun we're going to have while we are reading your essays. And so as much as possible, we know it's a daunting and maybe stressful and sometimes annoying process, but if you can have fun with it for yourself, right? It doesn't have to be funny if you don't consider yourself funny. It doesn't have to use big words if you don't love using big words. But if you are having fun while you are writing it, you're getting joy about telling about yourself, right? Bragging about yourself a little bit, which is what you should be doing in the college application process. Make sure that enthusiasm will come across to us. If you do have real joy in thinking about these schools and about you being on one of these campuses one day, that will come through to us while you are writing your essays. Kate, do you want to take the next few?
Sure. Yep. I think the next one is what a lot of folks are thinking about when they first get into this process is, what topic is the right one? And a few folks in the chat earlier on were saying, when I narrow down topics, I feel like I'm taking out pieces of my identity just for the admissions process. And that's never what we want you to do in this process. We don't want you to write for us. You don't know who's going to be reading your essay. You don't know what they're really interested in. And the reason we get into this work is not because we love reading essays about X or essays about Y. We get into this work because we love learning about you. We love meeting you on paper, on the road, in sessions like these. We really love working with students, and we view you all as individuals. So we never are going to expect you to write on a specific topic or present yourself in a way that's not genuine to you. We are not interested in you writing to us. And we can tell when you're writing to us. It doesn't feel authentic with the rest of your essays or the rest of the content in your application. And it's really obvious when a student is authentic and are really passionate about something and are being themselves. And the best way to go about that is just by doing it, by being authentic, by being who you are, and by really writing about things that make you excited. If you're excited, that gets us excited. We can see your enthusiasm kind of coming off of the page, and that's what gets us excited about your application. Also, share your essay with others. I think the biggest piece of advice a lot of people have is edit, right? You never want to turn in an essay that is unedited. But this goes beyond sort of those grammar edits or the edits for sentence structure. I would encourage you to share your essay with family members, with friends, maybe folks who can't necessarily read it for grammar, but are reading it for understanding, is this telling your story? Is this accurate to who you are? Are you missing a big piece of who you are? Are you hiding a piece of who you are in this process? And if so, kind of thinking through why. And making sure that you're telling your story in a way that those who love you the most can see that this is your story. They should be able to read your essay and say, I know that is your essay because I know who you are. But if you have an essay that is more generic and really doesn't speak to who you are as a person, they may not be able to pick it out of a lineup. So this is a great way for you to get feedback, not just on editing or grammar or sentence structure. Those things are very important, but also about content. So even if you read it to your grandma or your dad after work or something, those are all completely valid ways to kind of get feedback on essays, even if someone isn't reading it necessarily for editing purposes. And then Jenny, do you want to take the last two?
Yes, of course. That all being said, editing matters, but don't sacrifice your voice for the sake of brevity. And also make sure you don't sacrifice your voice in place of other people's voices. Like Kate mentioned, we like to get to know you and your stories. We also like getting to work with you at the age group that you're in. 16 to 18-ish years old usually is when you're applying to us. And so if you have adults, maybe a teacher, maybe a parent who's really involved, or a guardian or older family member who is very involved in this and wants to help you out, that's fantastic. But make sure that they're not taking away and editing kind of your voice out so that you don't sound like you, right? Because we want to get to know you and what you sound like. We generally know when you're sounding 17 or 18 because you are in that state of learning and of growth and of so much excitement. And that's what we love to be that's who we love to be working with. So don't edit out your voice for brevity or for because other people are telling you to, right? We want to hear from you. And then the last thing is start early, especially if you are applying to QuestBridge. That application just opened. And if you are selected as a finalist, you can rank up to 12 schools. You might not have to do additional information for up to 12 schools, but you also might have to do additional essays for up to 12 schools. You might have to write X school essays 12 times, or throughout the college application process, you might have to do all of those. And so make sure that you are getting a head start as much as possible. If you know that there's a school you want to apply to, whether it's through QuestBridge or through the Common App or through the Coalition app, if they use that, answering those questions, maybe now trying to figure out what might you want to put in those essays is going to be important because they are going to be short, right? We talked about word counts, word limits before, and making something concise. saying something in 100 words or less or 200 words or less is a lot harder than it sounds, especially when you're up against a deadline that it's something is due at midnight and you're starting at 11 p.m. It is going to be really, really hard to get all of the great things about you and the things that you love about the school and why you see such a good fit with that school across if you're under that kind of time crunch. And so we recommend start early, as in like yesterday, if you have that up availability, start as early as possible when you're thinking about these. It doesn't have to be complete, it doesn't have to be your final essay, but start trying to think about these and what you might want to write about, the things you want to pull out as early as you can. And with that, we have a lot of fantastic questions that have come in, which is really our favorite part, getting to answer these and really getting what's top of mind for you. And so one of them is about when should we have started these? And that really is kind of up to you, right? There's as long as the college says the application is due by X day, apologies if you can hear the sirens in the background here. If the college says the application is due X day, you don't have to get them in early. Most schools won't start reading your application until after the deadline has passed. So know that you don't have to get it in 2 weeks early unless they say they have rolling admissions. Then as early as possible usually is helpful. But your supplemental essays, ideally as early as possible that you're comfortable with, right? If you're starting to research Dartmouth or one of our peer schools or the Questbridge schools, try highlighting, maybe copying and pasting the aspects of those schools that you are noticing that you really like. One, you'll maybe notice some trends and patterns of things that really stand out to you and that really speak to you as an applicant as you're going through this college search process. And two, when it comes time to write those YX school essays, you're going to have a list of things about each school that you really gravitated towards that you might want to do more research on. Maybe you do that more research and you realize that school is not for me. Maybe you do more research and say, this is the kind of place that I want to be at. So I want to look in more into this because this really excites me. So I would say kind of start thinking about them now, maybe pulling what the essay topics are. Most schools, if not all schools, should have listed their supplemental essays for this upcoming cycle already on their websites, because the Common App, which the vast majority of schools are on, opened on August 1st. And so the supplemental essays are through that. And so you will be able to see what the topics they're asking. So maybe figuring out which topics speak to you the most, which ones you might want to write about. I would say start doing that as early as possible, as in after this session in a week or so, before the real hectic craziness of senior year really kicks in for you.
And this is another question about supplements and the difference between Common App and Questbridge. Do schools use the same supplement questions for both? At Dartmouth, we do. Not all schools will. So I would definitely recommend getting in contact with the Questbridge liaison at individual schools. You can do that by looking it up on their website. Sometimes you can just email the general admissions box and ask for the Questbridge liaison and see if they're going to ask the same questions in their supplement, what they require for the supplement, just so you can start getting a head start on that as soon as possible. There is a pretty short window in between when the application for the college match is due and when the supplements are due. So if you can get a head start on that, it's really, really beneficial for you. And always get in contact with the folks at the individual colleges to learn more. They're more than happy to answer your emails. Do you want to take another one, Jenny? Do you want to just go back and forth?
Yeah, perfect. We got a great one early on about how should you start the essay, and stuck on how you should get started on that. I think the piece of advice I usually give to students, especially if you don't know where to begin, I think introductions, beginnings of things are some of the hardest things to write. And so I would start truly kind of anywhere that you have. If you say, I know I want to say this sentence somewhere, or this is an idea I want to get across, I would start kind of writing that and brainstorm from that and then do the editing, right? That's why editing is so important, is then you can say, I have this second paragraph of this maybe longer essay already done. And now I know what I want my intro to say. Now I know what I want these first few sentences to say because I've gotten down to here and I know how I want to end it. Or I know where I want to get to in the middle. So I can tailor kind of my intro to that. So my advice, especially if you are kind of stuck doing some free writing and saying, I'm just going to keep writing. It doesn't have to be my intro. It doesn't have to be the first things I'm going to be, the first sentences that I'm going to be conveying to the admissions officers or whoever's going to be reading this. But I'm just going to write what kind of feels right at this moment in time, and go from there. We also had, we have a question here that I just want to get to because I think it is important to think about what colleges require in addition to essays. We had a question about asking, do admissions officers know when you've attended a virtual event? And I think it's helpful to keep in mind here, when is this a requirement or something that is recommended that you do? And when is it something that is truly optional? Some schools, some of them QuestBridge partners, many schools that are not QuestBridge partners will say that they take what is known as demonstrated interest into account. And that could be that in kind of maybe non-COVID years, the school comes to visit, the institution goes to visit your high school and you go meet with that admissions officer. That could be that you set up an interview with the admissions office for a specific school. That could be attending a virtual event. At Dartmouth and at many schools like Dartmouth, we don't take demonstrated interest into account. So we know if you've attended, and we do that for follow-up purposes, right? Because we'll email out to all of you and say, the session is available if you would like to review it again. We're not going to keep track of that stuff for your application because we don't take demonstrated interest into consideration for our application process. But that's a helpful thing to be asking different schools or to be searching on different schools' websites on if they take demonstrated interest into consideration during their evaluation process.
And another great question here on the QuestBridge topical essay, if we choose to write about a topic that sparked our intellectual curiosity, how do we make sure that our writing expresses who we are sort of outside of academics? That's a really great question. I think there's another question here that says, how do I just pick one topic for my essay? And the answer to that is that you don't necessarily have to pick just one topic to write about for your essay. There are lots of topics that can be interwoven into one another. There are lots of topics that are intersectional. I think the person that asked about that intellectual curiosity bit, I bet that there's an aspect of your identity that can be kind of interwoven into your academic interest. Why are you interested in that topic, for example? I get a lot of students who are maybe interested in medicine, interested in pre-med. Why is that? It's not just an academic interest, right? It's also a personal interest, potentially. Maybe there was something that happened in your personal life that kind of connects to those academic interests. There's always ways to weave in other aspects of your identity, of your personality into the essay, even if there's one specific topic that you want to focus on. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to have the same topic for all of the essays that you write. If you've got lots of different things you want to talk about, maybe you want to focus on intellectual curiosity for your big QuestBridge essay, but you still have a bunch of smaller essays that you can talk about. Maybe you can talk about your love of foosball or your love of fantasy sports in other essays. You don't necessarily have to focus all of your essays on the same topic or similar topics. There doesn't have to be sort of a theme of your application. The theme is just you, and you have lots of opportunities to pick up different pieces of your identity. And we really encourage you to write about different topics in different essays, because we don't know what you want us to know about you unless you tell us. Sometimes I'm reading an application and I think I know a student, and then they write an essay that's about something completely different or a different aspect of their personality. And that's the essay that I really love to read. I think there was a couple questions about like what makes an essay memorable. I think the ones that kind of give me another side of the student, something that I wouldn't have expected, something that really shows me themselves as a whole person, kind of beyond academics, beyond their extracurriculars. Those are the essays that really stand out in this process and really help you kind of do well. But there's lots of different topics, lots of different things that you can focus on for each of these individual essays. So definitely make sure that you're taking advantage of even the smallest essays. There are some QuestBridge essays that are literally a sentence long, but you can still have aspects of intellectual curiosity, aspects of your family or religion that you can really focus on for that as well. So don't discount those shorter essays and don't rush through them either. They're just as important as those bigger essays.
Wonderful. Kate, we're getting a number of kind of QuestBridge specific essay or QuestBridge specific questions. And as the QuestBridge liaison in our office, so Kate coordinates the QuestBridge process. If you end up applying as a college match finalist to Dartmouth through the QuestBridge process. And so kind of first and foremost is Dartmouth and other QuestBridge partners that students apply to, what do we have the ability to see? And so we can see all of your application. The thing that we cannot see is where you have ranked us and which other schools you have ranked. And so know that you can rank up to 12. You could rank 5, you could rank 3 if you would want to. You could only rank 1, right? You could only say, I'm only ranking Dartmouth. We won't know that if you've only ranked us. And we also won't know if you have ranked us on your list of 12, where we have fallen on your list of 12. And so I think that leads to another question about kind of early decision versus national college match. When should I do that? Kate, what advice do you have for students as they think about maybe thinking about early decision at a school or early action at a school versus going to the national college match?
Yeah, I think that that's a really tough decision. And we at Dartmouth ask that you use one application to apply to us. So you don't need to fill out the Common App and the QuestBridge application if you are a finalist. There are lots of folks who participate in the national college match up to the finalist point, and then maybe decide that they would rather apply early decision or early action. That's totally fine. At many QuestBridge partners, you can actually use your QuestBridge application to apply in those other rounds. Some students decide that they want to keep going with the match after they become a finalist, and some students kind of decide to not. So it's really up to you kind of how you decide if you want to participate in the match or not. I think the biggest piece of advice I have around deciding is really thinking through, what does the match offer? What do other options offer you? I think I talk to a lot of students that say, Dartmouth is my first choice. Should I apply via the match? And I think really thinking through what the match offers. It offers you a way to apply to many schools with the guarantee of a full ride for all 4 years. And that is something that many schools that are partner schools also offer in their financial aid offices. So at Dartmouth, for example, your financial aid will look virtually the same as a college match student versus an ED or an RD applicant. And that's something to keep in mind. And maybe if you take those finances out of the way, maybe another option could be better for you. So it's really kind of thinking about, what are the aspects of the national college match that really appeal to me? What am I really interested in? And also thinking through kind of the logistics of the match. So you can rank up to 12 colleges. That means that you may end up attending one of the schools that's on the bottom of your list. You may end up attending one of the schools that's at the top of your list. If you have 1 or 2 schools that are just really standing out for you, maybe early action or early decision, or even regular decision might be a better option. But if you're sitting there and saying, really, there are 5 schools plus schools that I'm really interested in, I would be so happy to attend to any of them, maybe the national college match is a better option for you. So I know that that's not a really specific answer. And I think that it's meant to be that way because it's really individualized. It depends on the individual student, kind of what's important to you in the college application process. And know that you do have the option, if you are a college match finalist, to be able to say, I don't want to participate in the match anymore, or I do. So it's not that if you apply, you're kind of cemented into that decision. You do have opportunities later on before you submit your rank list to decide, do I want to do this process or not? Maybe do a little bit more research, kind of understand the QuestBridge process. There are plenty of opportunities for you to kind of make those decisions down the line as well. I know that that wasn't a concrete answer, but hopefully that kind of gives you some context and how to think about this. Always happy to talk through this for your individual situation over email or over the phone. You can definitely reach out to us. I'll put my email address in the chat. We'd be happy to chat about this with you anytime.
Perfect. We also have some somewhat specific questions in the chat about finances. And just a quick kind of overview note on that. If a school is a partner with QuestBridge, and there are 40, 45 partner schools now, that means that they have a commitment to giving money, right? Giving scholarships to students who are from low income backgrounds, right? We have a commitment to that. So we have usually really good financial aid staff who will be willing to work with you at whatever stage you are in the process. That's at Dartmouth. And I will say that's probably at about every single other QuestBridge partner school. Financial aid will look different at every single school, and financial aid for every single family, even if your family incomes they look similar, it might look different for each of you because there's so much nuance, right? How many people are in the household? If you have siblings, how old are they? Are you supporting family? outside of the household, things like that. And so those are good questions to keep in mind to ask financial aid officers of our individual schools. And again, we have a commitment towards QuestBridge and towards really having really good financial aid packages and financial resources and offering those to as many students as possible. So definitely reach out about those and keep that in mind for every single school, especially if they're QuestBridge partner schools. It means that they are really interested in this kind of work. I guess we should wrap up pretty soon, Kate, because we're a tiny bit over time, and which is okay. And we love the folks who have stuck around. And if you had to leave or if you have to leave, no worries about that, because we realize we are a little bit over time. But I guess the last question that I think is a good one, especially as we think about another year going through on our end, virtual recruitment, and on your end, maybe virtual living for school and for researching schools, is what are the best ways to learn about the unique aspects of a university if you're not able to visit? Kate, do you have any ideas or recommendations for students?
Yeah, I think attending events like this, I think this is a really great example of ways that you can connect with an admissions officer, with current students, even in a virtual format. There are so many different virtual offerings that Dartmouth has, that all of the institutions that you are looking at via the QuestBridge match or other institutions in the country are offering. Almost all of them have virtual tours and info sessions, opportunities for you to connect with current students. If there's an opportunity to connect with a current student, that means that we want you to take advantage of that. We want you to email current students and understand what it's like from their perspective. They can tell you about kind of kooky traditions or what they like to do for fun. And that can give you an idea of what sort of institution that'll be like, but also kind of give you food for thought when you're thinking about that why Dartmouth essay or why X institution essay. There's so many virtual opportunities. I think also reading about the institution from current students is something that I used a lot in my process. So I never visited the school that I ended up attending before I showed up on move-in day. My family didn't have the funds to kind of go out of state and look at other schools. So I did all of my research online. So it can be done. I assure you that it can. And folks have been doing that for the past couple of years during the pandemic. There's so many ways to learn more. And I think the best thing to think about now is that you are in a really good place for virtual recruitment, because so many colleges are putting so much time and energy into meeting you where you are behind a computer screen, and really take advantage of those opportunities. I think even if it's just a half an hour or you can sit in for 15 minutes, you'll learn more about the institution. And keeping track, I think, is something that can be really helpful too, in a spreadsheet or a Google Doc, or however it makes sense for you to kind of keep track of different things that you learn about institutions that kind of stand out to you. Can be really helpful when you're thinking about your essays, but also about your interests in different colleges.
Wonderful. The one thing I will add on Kate's note about connecting with students is, yes, connect with current students, recent graduates, if you know them or if you're able to get in contact with them somehow. That's something that can be really, really helpful because they know what the school is like at this particular moment. Another thing that I usually tell students to do, and there's no guarantee that undergrads will be able to respond to this, but a lot of undergraduate clubs and organizations will have a certain email, including the Dartmouth QuestBridge Scholars Club. They will have an email address at dartmouth.edu, something like that. And different clubs and organizations will have that. And that's going to be across campuses. And so if you are able to find those things, maybe clubs or experiences that interest you, that might interest you, try emailing those and see if you get a response. Sometimes you won't get a response because undergrads are really, really busy also. So there's no guarantee that they can respond or that they are going to want to respond. But if they do, those can be really fruitful conversations for you to have and also give you a different perspective than the connect with the student that's on the student page of the admissions website, right? Because they work for us. And so they'll have a certain kind of view that they're going to be sharing. And so make sure that you're getting as much information as possible. And that could be a way, if you don't know somebody who has gone to the school or who's going to that school, that could be another way to do it and go about it. And with that, we are now at the hour mark, which is when our Zoom folks on the other end at Dartmouth are saying, please get off. You're taking up a lot of people's time. So we want to say thank you all for being with us this evening, this afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. And we hope to see your applications, whether that's in QuestBridge, that's in early, or that's in regular decision at Dartmouth. And we wish you the best of luck as you move forward throughout all of this. We hope that this was helpful. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.